How are you? I'm Peter Van Praagh. I'm president of HFX, the organization that puts on the annual Halifax International Security Forum. I'd like to welcome you all to the 16th Halifax International Security Forum. As you all know, this is the only forum in the world that links democracy with security. And that really is what makes us unique, and that is why people travel from over 60 countries to be here. We have with us, of course, our host, Minister Blair. This year we also have Minister Joly coming with us, the Chief of Defense, and then we have guests and visitors from the United States, Congress. We've got ministers from around the world, and it's really going to be an important weekend of conversations on issues ranging from just about everything. But I want to say a couple of words now about Ukraine. For the third year running, the survival of Ukraine's democracy is on the agenda here at Halifax. And for the third year running, we are advancing the argument that every international issue is linked to Ukraine's victory over Putin's Russia. Taiwan's security, indeed all of East Asia, Israel's security and the future of the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, every international issue is directly linked to Ukraine's victory over Putin's Russia. Victory. But judging from today's reports in traditional and social media, we might be forgiven for believing that Ukraine can no longer win the war against Russian aggression. This widespread forecast is not true. It was not true when all the experts said the same thing on February 24th, 2022, the date Putin invaded, and it is not true now. This conventional narrative is all a jumble of doom and gloom, and here at Halifax this year, we are going to counter-spin, change this doom and gloom narrative. And so with that, it is my honor to introduce Canada's Minister of National Defence, the host for the weekend, and my friend, the Honourable Bill Blair, Canada's Minister of National Defence.
Thank you very much, Peter. And it's also a great honor to be with you all here this morning. Good morning, bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to the Halifax Forum. This forum, for the past 16 years, has served as one of the most important venues for discussions about defense and security in North America and around the world. And the success of this forum is directly attributable to Peter and his team. And every year, they've provided us with a venue for us to discuss our biggest shared challenges, to learn from each other, to reaffirm our commitment to global stability and security. I know for me personally, these conversations have become even more important as the threats we face become increasingly unpredictable. Change has become our only true constant. This weekend, we will be discussing the issues that we are all seized with, issues for which we feel a great sense of urgency and a responsibility to respond. National security and defense are being impacted by cyber threats and the development of new and disruptive technologies. Climate change is rapidly redefining conflict and what it takes to be safe and secure. At this forum, we're going to have important discussions around how to respond to potential adversaries, how we work together to support our international partners, and also to acknowledge that this week, Ukraine entered its 1,000th day of war. The bravery and sacrifice that Ukrainians have shown in the face of this aggression has been nothing short of inspirational to all of us. Putin thought that he could swiftly take over Ukraine, but he failed to anticipate their resolve, alongside NATO and our partners who have come together to fight against this brutal invasion. I also believe that Putin thought that he could weaken NATO, and he has failed completely in that effort, because NATO is stronger today, more deeply united, and united in its resolve to make sure that we are able to respond to that aggression. Among the military aid that Canada has provided, I am very pleased to share with you this morning that the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System, or NASAMS, that we purchased almost 2 years ago in partnership with the United States have now arrived in Ukraine. These NASAMS will help strengthen Ukraine's air defense systems against the destructive air attacks on its military sites, on its critical infrastructure, and on its population. I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the United States, and in particular, Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and Ambassador Cohen, the U.S.'s ambassador to Canada, for their collaboration and support on this effort. Canada's support for Ukraine is and will remain unwavering, and I know that many of the conversations over the next few days will focus on how we can continue to help Ukrainians in their fight against Russia to victory. This forum in Halifax is a unique venue for these discussions precisely because it is a gathering of friends and like-minded nations having open and frank discussions on security and defense. These are our closest friends and allies. We are joined as well by industry representatives and academics. These discussions are important. They're important to the future of our country, but they're also important to global peace and security. I look very much forward to the many critical conversations that we will have over the coming days with our friends, and I want to say thank you again to Peter and his team for making these conversations possible every year. Thank you.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. My name is Andrew Green and I will be the moderator today. Je m'appelle Andrew Green et je serai votre modérateur. I would invite media to the mics to ask one question and one follow-up. Please also start by specifying your media outlet and your media outlet and your name. Let's also try to make sure that only one journalist per outlet asks a question. We will do our best to accommodate everyone in the time we have today. J'invite les médias à se limiter à une question et un follow-up. Veuillez également commencer par préciser les médias pour lesquels vous travaillez. Essayons également de faire en sorte que un seul journaliste par média pose une question. We can get started. Merci.
Bonjour, Monsieur Blair. Bienvenue à Halifax. My question will be in English, of course.
And I thank you for that.
Yeah. There's a Republican congressman who told our colleague from Politico Playbook that the Canadian track to reach the 2% spending is arrogance, freeloading, and cheat. And he had, if everyone had the policies of Trudeau, there would be no NATO. What's your reaction to those comments?
I think the comments are unfair. Canada, when I came to this forum last year, I took the opportunity to assure all of the participants and our allies that Canada recognized that decades of underinvestment in the Canadian Armed Forces had to change, and that we were going to do more, that we recognized we had to do more, and that we were going to do more. A few months later, we released our new National Defense Policy Update, in which we clearly articulated a path to make significant new investments in the Canadian Armed Forces. But we also indicated in that report, we acknowledged that more would need to be done. At the Washington Summit that took place in July, we went back and I was able to speak to my colleagues, the defense ministers of NATO, about our plan, a verifiable and credible plan in order to reach 2%. But one of the challenges we face, when our allies say they want us to reach that spending metric, we've made that commitment and the answer is yes. And I've told them that you're pushing on an open door. We are going to make those investments. We know that we need to do more, but it's getting there in a timely way is going to require cooperation, collaboration with our closest allies, with industry, and some really hard work by the Canadian Armed Forces. The Canadian Armed Forces has responded with a new plan for reconstitution of its personnel and the maintenance of existing equipment, and I think we've already demonstrated just in the last 2 years a real commitment to begin the important and necessary work of acquiring new platforms for the Canadian Armed Forces with planes and ships and submarines and other new technologies, new weapon systems, ammunition. All of that work is well underway. And one of the benefits I think I'm hoping at this forum is it'll enable us to have further conversations with industry and with our allies on how we can accelerate the delivery of those programs.
And is there any scenario when you can consider to speed up, I mean, maybe reach the 2% during the Trump presidency, so before 2030?
I believe there are many opportunities for us to accelerate. And for example, I've already engaged in a number of conversations with some of the CEOs of the large military industrial organizations and corporations that we do business with. One of the challenges we face, and I often say to my defense minister colleagues, all of us have the same challenge, getting the money and spending the money. And spending the money well and creating really good value for our national defense, for our citizens, and for our armed forces requires that we work more collaboratively together. I believe that there are many opportunities in our future to work closely with our allies, including, of course, the United States, but also work with those large companies and small companies, with innovators and creators that are developing the weapon systems, the platforms, the equipment that our armed forces are going to need in order to accelerate and make more efficient our procurement processes and make sure that we really maximize the value of our partnerships and relationships. I'll give you just a small, quick example. We recently made a decision, a little less than a year ago, to go with a new multi-mission aircraft, the Poseidon P-8, which is manufactured by Boeing. A big part of our decision-making in that is it is also exactly the same platform used by our Five Eyes partners, by Norway and Germany, as well as the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. And so making sure that we work together collaboratively, I think that demonstrates a path to getting things done more quickly, more efficiently, and more effectively for our armed forces. We're going to continue with those opportunities to get the job done as quickly as possible. I mentioned in my remarks, there is a sense of urgency of what we have to do. I think we are all seized with that urgency, and we are finding ways to get this job done. It's an important job, it's a necessary job, but get it done as quickly as possible.
Good morning.
So, and I'll try to be shorter in my answers.
Good afternoon. My name is Olesya Shavikova, Premier Channel, Kyiv, Ukraine. First of all, we are very grateful for your support, and although the world is divided now about Ukrainian victory, we are not. Ukrainians only have one way forward to the victory. But we understand that after the war, we're going to be facing another problem, and that is landmines. 25% of the Ukrainian territory is mined, and it will take lives, it will take arable land. So I would like to ask you a question, Minister. Are there any proactive current initiatives within the government, Canadian government, and especially Ministry of Defense, taking place about the demining of Ukraine?
Yes, first of all, established under the Ukraine Defense Contact Group organization that was established under the leadership of Secretary Austin. We've established a number of coalitions within that defense contact group for Ukraine, including a demining thing, because I want to acknowledge Ukraine now, parts of Ukraine are the most heavily mined areas of any place in the world. Canada has a long history of working in demining around the world. Well, I believe that my country has a great deal to contribute. There is a very important and lively discussion taking place among all of the allies who are there to support Ukraine. The situation right now is somewhat difficult and dire because there's an ongoing conflict. But when that conflict comes to an end, then I believe the international community has a responsibility to work very closely with Ukraine to render that land safe for its future use by your citizens.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Minister. Mike Tutton from the Canadian Press.
Good morning, Mike.
Halifax. Is the fact that you're on the special cabinet committee that's dealing with the arrival of Trump 2.0 signal that Canada's defense industry is going to, you're going to face pressure to accelerate the pace of reaching 2% prior to 2020.
Mike, can I tell you, the pressure I feel is not in response to the encouragement of our allies, but rather this is what Canada needs. This is what our armed forces, our national defense requires so that we can live up to our responsibility to defend our country, our continent, but also to live up to our responsibilities to our international coalitions through NATO and NORAD, and now in the Indo-Pacific and even other places of conflict in the world. I actually believe that the work that we are undertaking now for defense to reconstitute it, to acquire new platforms and equipment, new ships and submarines and planes, and all of those investments that we have to make is an opportunity rather than a challenge. And I think of it in terms of an opportunity to work more collaboratively with our closest friends and allies in order to get the job done. And one of the things I hope to do at this forum is to engage in conversations about how we can work more effectively together. We've got a big job to do. We've got big investments to make. And I want to make sure that we get good value in those investments for Canada's investment in them. And I think the best way to do that is to do it collaboratively with our closest friends and allies.
And just to be absolutely clear, 2032 is the current goal for 2%?
2032 was I think, a realistic plan, because I know how long it takes to build the new destroyers that we are undertaking to build through our new national shipbuilding strategy. And by the way, those ships will be built right here in Halifax. We also know how long it's going to take to deliver the F-35 fighters that we have ordered, how long it's going to take to even acquire the new P-8s. even how long it's going to take to make sure that we turn around and build upon our efforts to reconstitute our services by significantly increasing the number of people we're taking in and the skills that we're going to require to do the job. 2032, I think, is a realistic plan, and I tried to offer to our allies a credible and verifiable plan on how we would get to 2%. But I believe that there are opportunities to accelerate that, and it's going to involve greater collaboration and cooperation with industry and with our allies in order to get that done. So the plan that we have presented by 2032, I think, is a credible and realistic plan. But I also believe that there are many opportunities in our future to accelerate those expenditures because we are all seized with the urgency of getting this job done.
Hi, Heidi Petracek with Global National. Minister, just wondering what Canada is doing right now to prepare for the potential repercussions of a second Trump presidency on global security issues like Ukraine, things like NATO.
Well, first of all, I was also a member of our government when we worked with the previous Trump administration, and in so many aspects, we worked very well together. And I think in the mutual advantage of both of our countries, I think, as I said, there are many opportunities for us to continue going forward in that relationship. I've worked with the United States for very many decades, and one of the things that I have grown confident and trusting in is the strength and leadership of their institutions in the defense, in the State Department, in their Justice Department, in their Congress, and in their Senate. Among the American people, that's a relationship that Canada has benefited from and supported for well over 150 years. I have great confidence in that relationship. We've got work to do together. It's in our mutual interest to do it together, and I think there are many opportunities for us.
So follow-up or somewhat separate question, what is Canada doing right now to combat misinformation because it is a threat to global security, to electoral processes? What would you say Canada is doing right now to combat it?
Actually, I'm very proud of some of the work they're doing, and in particular, within my own department, the Communications Security Establishment, I think, is doing some very leading-edge work on their own and with our allies in countering misinformation. There is a constant attack on our critical infrastructure, on our institutions, on our provinces and territories, on our information systems that's being perpetrated by hostile state actors and criminal organizations around the world. We are working very diligently respond to that. We also have legislation before the House in order to counter some of this information. I think the intent, it's different from different state actors, but the intent is to sow division, to create polarization in our society and to undermine public trust in important institutions. That trust is the currency of our success. And we have to do work really hard to maintain that trust. A big part of that is intervention in some of those misinformation systems that are being deployed against us. But another thing is, I think, having frank and honest conversations with Canadians. I have great trust in my fellow citizens that if we give them the right information, they'll understand when they're being misled.
Good morning, Minister
Hi,
Blair.
Justin.
Hi, Justin Ling, freelance. Obviously, a lot of the conversation will be around that 2% domestic spending target. But President-elect Trump talked a lot about freeloaders and free riders around the world. I'm wondering, do you envision, based on your conversations thus far with his transition team, that Canada will be expected to step up, whether it's in NORAD, whether it's in Arctic patrolling, whether it's in Ukraine, Europe, Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait, or elsewhere? Do you have a vision for a bigger role that Canada will play with the Trump administration? And Peter, to your end, has the forum had conversations with the transition team? Have they been part of the forum this year?
All of our allies have made it very clear. They all know they need to do more, and they want us to do more. And I think part of the request that is directed towards the Canadian Armed Forces to do more is because of the exemplary reputation that they have earned over decades of service around the world. Canadians have been there. They've always answered the call, and almost all of the work that we do in Canada is expeditionary. We haven't had to invest significantly in defense of our own country, but that situation is changing, and you know, I think we've talked about that in our new defense policy, and you're familiar with it, some of the challenges we're facing right here in North America. But I would also share with all of our allies, including the United States, that they're pushing on an open door. We all have already recognized that we need to do more, and we're going to do more. We're also asking for help because we believe that spending Canadian hard-earned taxpayer dollars well requires, I have to manage both money and the commodity of time, and accelerating how we deliver on these things, making sure that we always, follow the law and engage in all necessary due diligence. But there's, I think, a lot in some of our procurement processes that have slowed us down, and even in some of our really essential relationships, foreign military sales, for example, in our relationships with some of the large military industries in the United States and around the world. We've got to find a way to do better and work better. I think there's an opportunity here for us to be responsive to what industry needs from us, but also to communicate more clearly what we need from industry. And I think in that collaboration, with the support of our international partners, I think we can move forward far more assertively and far more effectively.
It's nice to get a question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry to.
I was thinking this was really easy up here. Yeah, we've had conversations. The team, as you all know, is taking shape. It's still a little amorphous. I'd point out that during the first Trump administration, Halifax International Security Forum welcomed very senior administration people every year to the forum. We've got very good relations. I imagine there are people in the forum who we don't even know who might go into the Trump administration, but I just want to emphasize the congressional delegation that we have this year. And as you all know, the United States Congress is a co-equal branch, and the Senate and the senators who are coming really represent an important, influential part of American government. So.
As a, I guess, quick follow-up, there are certain aspects of the incoming Trump administration that pose potential problems for Canada. Is there anything you see on the horizon that could affect or change the Canadian military's relationship with their American colleagues? They're talking about using military assets for mass deportations. You're looking at members of the national security apparatus who had formal ties with the Russian government. What are you doing to prepare and to harden Canada from those possible threats?
And again, I have a lot of confidence in the institution, the defense institution of the United States. That our relationship with the U.S., the Pentagon and the U.S. Department of Defense is very deep and strong and trusting. And I think there are clearly very shared values, including respect for the rule of law. I'm looking forward to continuing in those discussions. I appreciate. After every election, there is a change of perspective and sometimes rhetoric, but our fundamental responsibilities, I think, remain unchanged. And I believe that there is great unity in recognizing what the real threats to our security, our safety, our citizens are, and that the best way to respond to that is together. I believe that all of our allies share that commitment. I have great confidence we'll be able to work it out. Hey, Michael.
Michael Serapio, CPAC. Peter, I'll begin with you. So, question 2. Listen, you opened up by making the comment that every international issue challenge is tied to Ukraine's victory over Russia. Connect the dots. Why?
So, number one, Russia is a member of the United Nations Security Council. Number 2, it's a nuclear power. And number 3, if it gets away with this naked aggression, we are entering a world where its might makes right. And that is a world that is not safe for anybody. And so this is an aggression that cannot stand. This is something that the Russians must fail. And once that is accomplished by Ukraine and continued support by Canada and all of Ukraine's friends and partners, including the United States, that message then, that fortitude, will resonate around the world. And other actors, we call them the crinks, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, will understand the fortitude of the democracies.
My second question has to do with the missile defense system, and I'm going to ask both of you to answer, please. Because, and to my understanding, it's taken 2 years from the moment that Canada made the commitment for this missile defense system and delivery to Ukraine. Ukraine is well represented in this form. I'm wondering what the reaction has been. Are they expressing frustration that it has taken so long? Are they expressing gratitude given the moment in time that Ukraine faces itself right now? Peter, I'll ask you to start.
I don't represent the government, any government, and so my conversations with Ukrainian officials really are private. And so I would just say that with response to everything Ukraine, this is a country that, as the minister said, has been at war for 1,000 days. And so, yes, there is, of course, continued frustration on every issue with everybody. And that doesn't mean that the message that I get more than anything else is gratitude.
Minister.
I will also acknowledge Ukraine has always been grateful for every support that us and our allies have been able to provide. But I think we share a certain frustration on how long it takes to deliver. We also share increasing concern about how quickly Russia has been able to reconstitute its armed forces, its munitions. The now involvement of North Korea in that conflict is deeply concerning and escalatory. I know it's not just concerning to those of us who are directly supporting Ukraine, but it's also deeply concerning to Japan and Korea and others in the Indo-Pacific region because of what it means geopolitically. But I will also share with you, when you talk about frustration, I think I'll share my frustration. When we first said we wanted to help Ukraine, they said they urgently needed missile defense systems to protect their citizens, their cities, and their critical infrastructure. And we said yes. And we put the money on the table and said, okay, we'll do this. But when we went to industry, they told us to get in line, and it would probably take 4 or even 5 years to deliver on those systems. Fortunately, the United States stepped up and said, we have bigger buying power and perhaps a more advantageous position in the contract. They said, join us. And so they were kind enough to let us to join in on that, and it still took 2 years. I think that is part of the conversations we need to have here with industry, and not just here, but ongoing, with how we accelerate production. One of the things that Jens Stoltenberg said to us when he was Secretary General of NATO is that production is deterrence, and I agree. And all of us recognize that we need to work more closely, more effectively with industry to make sure that we can meet the moment. Our adversaries are rapidly building up their militaries. China is actually going through the largest military buildup of any nation in the world since the Second World War. And it is deeply concerning. We have to keep up, not in order to engage in conflict, but to prevent conflict. I think the best way to deter conflict is to be well prepared to respond to it. And as we sometimes say, give the porcupine a little more quills. And so that's important work that we all have to do. And so doing it together, I think, is the right way to get it done.
Hi, Chris Lambie, National Post. It's a question for the minister. Can I get your take on the Royal Canadian Navy making the decision to steer away from the anthem Heart of Oak? And do you think that will help at all with modern recruiting efforts?
I'm not sure that that's the intent of the Navy. I think it's a question better put to Admiral Topshee and to his officials. It's a decision that they've undertaken. But I would also note the Royal Australian Navy also, a number of years ago, decided to come up with their own Australian naval anthem. And they've decided to do it that way. And the Heart of Oak was written in 1759. I think it is a tradition, and we're not necessarily saying we abandon all tradition, but I think the new Royal Canadian Navy has a right to choose its own path forward, and I would certainly support that. And again, I've seen people try to suggest that this is part of some other agenda. Quite frankly, I think that's nonsense. I think the Royal Canadian Navy has every right to continue to advance and modernize, and if they want to have an anthem that's appropriate for them and theirs alone, how could we say no?
Do you think modernizing the anthem will help with recruiting efforts?
Well, again, I will tell you, I'm really impressed with the effort that the entire armed forces is making to enhance recruiting efforts. But it's more than just getting people to come in and apply. Last year, nearly 70,000 people applied to join the Canadian Armed Forces. That's a lot of people who wanted to serve their country in uniform. I think we need to look at our processes and how we bring them on, and our security background checks, and in the medical requirements that we have of them, in ensuring that we are able to bring people in, the best people, because we need great people. But Canada's a diverse country. We need great people in the Canadian Armed Forces. And great people for us includes great women, great Indigenous candidates, great diverse Canadians are all part of what makes a great and strong Canadian Armed Forces. And I would point out, just the other day, Secretary Austin, who was a 4-star general, who led his nation's armed forces in conflict over many years, acknowledged that women in the U.S. armed forces make them stronger. And I am absolutely supportive of the Canadian Armed Forces efforts to make sure that their organization is as strong as we can make it.
Hi there, Minister Blair. Catherine Cullen
Hi,
from
Catherine.
CBC Radio's The House. Do you have any plans to join the new northern group Ukraine set up by 12 countries to help build Ukraine's defense industry?
As a matter of fact, we actually undertook, I was in Ukraine in February of this year. I met with their Minister of Strategic Industry. He talked to me about, we had just delivered for them about 900 Canadian-made drones, really great drones. And he thanked me for them. He said, those are terrific drones, and thank you so much for supplying them. But then he asked me an interesting question. He said, why didn't you buy our drones? And he laid out for me some of the work that they've been doing, really innovative, smart things in developing a drone capability across a number of different platforms and technologies that were being really effective at helping them to respond to the Russian aggression, and they were using very effectively, and they were doing it very efficiently as well. And he asked me if we would consider purchasing some of their drones and donating them to Ukraine. And I said yes, because how could you not? And we then provided them with some money as a bit of a pilot project, and it worked exceptionally well. And so we are now very much in discussions with our allies on how to get that done. And there are a number of different coalitions that are facilitating that. When I said yes, by the way, I was a bit challenged because I didn't have a legal mechanism to actually get the money to Ukraine. So I went to the Brits, who did have a legal mechanism, and I got the money to the Brits, and they got it to Ukraine. The Dutch have also come forward with another plan. I think that's the incredible power of our coalitions and our partnerships in NATO and in all of the countries interested in supporting Ukraine. We're finding ways to get this done together. Canada is going to continue to make investments in Ukraine industry because it's something that can help. I also want to make sure that that also creates opportunities for our armed forces and for our industry in creating really great partnerships and collaborations between Canadian innovators and Ukrainian innovators is also really a good thing to do.
I will note, I didn't hear you comment on that initiative specifically.
We are part of every initiative that
including this one.
Well, and again, the one you're talking about is we already have a mechanism in place to do precisely what that group is doing. One of the things, the work that I will do at the next time we meet as the Ukraine Defense Contract Group is to make sure that there's a real alignment between all of the countries who agree this is the right thing to do and find the most efficient way to get it done.
So what kind of conversations or work is being done right now to talk about what happens if the United States removes itself from that space in about 2 months?
And again, I'm not going to get into the hypothetical of that. I think as I've said, change is the one constant that we've had to deal with, not just for the last 1,000 days, but for a number of years. And so there's always contingency planning. I think we all recognize we all have to step up. We all have to do more. This is a critical moment in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and war, and we have to make sure that we remain united and strong in our support of Ukraine to achieve the appropriate right outcome for the Ukrainian people, which is victory in this conflict.
Minister Peter Hates, Nick Taylor Raisy from Politico. I hate to keep talking about defense spending, but Canada's defense spending and the spending of allies is an active conversation, and I want, this is for both of you. I wonder, you've both talked about a wide variety of important conversations this weekend at the forum, Ukraine being, of course, an important one. I wonder how much of the bandwidth of those conversations, whether the plenary or quieter conversations with colleagues, will be scooped up by questions about Canada's defense spending.
Can I suggest nobody has to argue with me that we need to spend more money? I came here last year and said we needed to spend more money. We needed to do more. We've been working tirelessly over the past 12 months to do just that. And you know, I've now got a substantial new budget. I've also got commitments from my government on the investments we have to make, and we have what we think is a timeline on when we can get that done. And so when our friends and allies in this forum and in every other conversation says we want Canada to do more, as I said, they're pushing on an open door. We agree. We're trying very hard to do that. We could use some help. And that's the conversations I'm hoping to have at this forum, to ask industry and our international partners, help Canada get this done.
So I'm going to tell you, I think most of you know, I'm from here, but I live and work in Washington, D.C. And I interact with Americans in this space all day, every day. And I do think there was relief and real satisfaction with the announcements made by Canada at the end of the NATO summit in July. And I know that some of you are reporting on negative comments. There's always going to be negative comments, but the private conversations I had was that, in fact, that was a surprise. People didn't expect that. I do think Minister Blair played an incredible leadership role in that direction, and the conversations that I had with virtually all Americans was one of real satisfaction with Canada.
And just a follow-up for the ministry, you've laid out several major initiatives to possibly accelerate Canada meeting that target. I wonder if you have kind of early markers for the critics that, and I take your point, Peter, but the critics who do exist and who will push Canada, if you have kind of early markers to say, well, here's what you can expect relatively soon.
Yeah, I'll give a couple of examples. One of the things, I can buy boats and planes and tanks and trucks. I need people. I need people to put on there, and I don't think we had presented to our allies and even to our own country a credible plan to make sure that we could get the people into the organization trained and deployed where we needed them in order to sail those ships and those submarines and fly those planes. But it's not just piloting the planes, by the way. You need a whole crew of people with extraordinary range of skills in order to keep those planes in operation. And so we've worked really hard on making sure that that's the kind of the quiet work behind the scenes. And I am very confident that the Chief of Defense and her team have come up with a very credible plan to significantly accelerate the onboarding of people. I think we demonstrated just in this past year with the commitment, and it wasn't an easy decision, by the way, to go with the P-8 as our option for the multi-mission aircraft. There was a lot of competing interest at play there, but it was the right and necessary thing to do, and I think our allies saw that our resolve to do what was required was there. As well, and I'll just, in April when we came up with our new defense policy update, at the time I had no authority to move forward on underwater surveillance submarines. And so we said we were going to explore it in April, and everybody rolled their eyes and said, you're just kicking the can down the road. 2 months later, the Prime Minister announced that we were going to acquire 12 of them. 2 months after that, we went into the market with an RFI. Our Admiral has been traveling around the world, visiting shipyards. We're moving forward on that. I hope that sends a signal. We understand what needs to get done, and we're going to do it. There are also really important discussions, investments that we are making in things, in really important things for North America, but also for our Canada doing its part around the world on NORAD modernization and some of the technologies with over-the-horizon radar and over-the-polar radar. Those are big investments that are going to be made, and we've already budgeted $38.6 billion to do that. We're also making significant investments in research and development with our international partners, and the discussions even around AUKUS. And we often hear that, about AUKUS, Canada wasn't in the market for a nuclear submarine. We're looking for conventional submarines. But Canada has a great deal to contribute to other elements of the AUKUS discussion in its second pillar, because there's real expertise and innovation in Canada on AI and quantum computing and in maritime sensors and all of the things that are going to be important to the success of the AUKUS project. Canada is very much invited to those tables, and we're working hard on that. I honestly believe, as Peter has said, our allies heard us, and we have sent, not just, we're not going to be judged on our good intentions. We'll be judged on our actions, but I think we can start putting some actions on the table that we are moving resolutely forward to do what is required.
Thank you.
Hi, Minister. My name is Pierre Chapdelaine de Moellon. I'm with Radio Canada. Yesterday, Russia shot a intercontinental ballistic missile on Ukraine, and then Putin talked about a global conflict, the fact that Russia was ready to strike military installations in countries that authorize use of weapons against Russian infrastructure. My question is, what's your assessment of the situation, and what is Canada's answers to Putin's allegations? Well,
first of all, we're always deeply concerned by any escalation in that conflict, and the use of an ICBM by Russia against Ukraine, in my opinion, is a significant and serious and concerning escalation in that conflict. And at the same time, I also recognize the actions of a bully. When a bully's victim can hit back, the bully reacts badly, as Mr. Putin is reacting badly right now. But I think that unity and strength among all of the allies who support Ukraine is the best response to that bully.
Okay. And my follow-up would be, then what's your message to the next American administration? Because President Trump talked about ending the war in Ukraine in like 24 hours. So are territorial concessions like inevitable to end the war?
My message to all of our allies, including the United States, that Canada will be and always remain a strong, resolute, and reliable partner in our efforts to, again, promote freedom and democracy around the world and uphold the international rules that have kept all of our countries safe. And that includes in response to a bully who believes that simply because they are mightier, that they have a right to go and take someone else's territory.
But about the territorial the concessions, are they inevitable?
Well, again, I think that change is the constant. I've said it 3 times now here, even at this press conference. I think we have to respond to the situation as it evolves. And there are a number of really important conversations that will take place. And at the same time, I also believe that among all our allies, we remain united in support of Ukraine and in support of Ukraine's valiant fight against Russian aggression. And frankly, if we were to concede to that Russian aggression in Ukraine, many of our other allies in the Baltics and in Poland and in the entire Eastern Front, and even for the Arctic countries, including our own, we could see just a continued escalation of Russian aggression in many other theaters. And so I think it's important that we stand up strong and remain standing strong.
Last question.
Hello, my name is Mizell from Indigenous Futures Canada, and you mentioned that armed forces need women and Indigenous recruits. And so
I also mentioned diverse recruits, but
yeah,
that was the whole gamut.
Indigenous Futures Canada. So this is sort of what
Got
we're focusing on. So yeah, Indigenous people have historically contributed significantly to Canada's armed forces and navy. However, as you mentioned, barriers to recruitment and retention still persist. So would you be able to share specific strategies or initiatives that Canada is planning to implement or would like to implement to address these barriers to increase Indigenous enrollment? And additionally, how do you see Indigenous communities and organizations playing a role in supporting these efforts?
Yeah, a couple of things here. First of all, we have the Canadian Rangers, which are substantively Indigenous. Right across the north, they're an incredibly important part of our national security apparatus. In the far north, they do important work for us. They are our eyes and ears in the north, and frankly, I believe that we can do much more to support them and to grow their operation, and not just with the members of the Rangers, but the Junior Rangers is also an extraordinary program that I very strongly support. We're building a new facility in Yellowknife. It's a 9,000 square meter facility, which will be the new national headquarters of the Ranger program in the north. There's also discussions taking place. I don't want to get too far ahead of an announcement that's going to be made next week, but I know Admiral Topshee of the Royal Canadian Navy has been in very close discussions with, he's got a number of really innovative and clever ways in which we can attract more people into the Royal Canadian Navy and therefore into the armed forces. But we're working really closely with the Premier of the Yukon right now to see if we can establish a reserve component there, which will give us additional opportunities to encourage and support Indigenous participation. And we need them. And frankly, the last thing I would say, you'll note in our new defense policy, we've placed an enormous focus on the Arctic. We know that its strategic value and importance to our national and continental defense. But if we're going to be effective in the far north, first of all, I think there's huge opportunities to us invest in multi-use infrastructure that will benefit the people of the north. When I went there, those Indigenous communities told us, it's not about a plane going by or a boat sailing by when the ice is out. It's about infrastructure. It's about fiber optics. It's about highways and airport runways and power plants and water treatment plants and health facilities. But they have also made it very clear to us, if we want to operate effectively in the north, it would be much to our value, and I agree, that we incorporate Indigenous traditional knowledge into our deployments and training there. And so I think it's not just the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do, is to encourage greater Indigenous participation in our armed forces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Merci pour votre temps.
Thank you, Peter.